So, friends, we have two readings today. The first comes from the Old Testament book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 3, and I'll be reading the first 8 verses. Ecclesiastes, chapter 3, verses 1 through 8. Let us listen to the word of God. There is a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heavens, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to tear down and a time to build, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to scatter stones and a time to gather them, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to search and a time to give up, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to mend, a time to be silent and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. The second reading comes from the New Testament book of Matthew, and I'll be reading Matthew chapter 8, verses 18 to 22. Matthew 8, 18 to 22. The cost of following Jesus. When Jesus saw the crowd around him, he gave orders to cross to the other side of the lake. Then a teacher of the law came to him and said, "Teacher, I'll follow you wherever you go." Jesus replied, "Foxes have dens and birds have nests, but the Son of Man has no place to lay his head." Another disciple said to him, "Lord, first let me go and bury my father." But Jesus told him, "Follow me and let the dead bury their own dead." Friends, God is still speaking. Let our hearts and minds be open to listen.
Would you pray with me, please? O Lord, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be acceptable in your presence, for you are our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. For everything there is a season, wrote the ancient Hebrew poet who authored the book we call Ecclesiastes. Now, perhaps when you hear these words, like me, you hear them set to music, sung by the Byrds or Judy Collins or Pete Seeger. To everything there is a season and a time for every purpose under heaven. Well, in case you haven't noticed, the seasons are turning. This week I heard the honking of geese and saw their V-shaped progress across the sky. The light is getting that slanty look. The nights are beginning to grow longer. In our house, we no longer need to hang towels in the windows as makeshift blackout curtains to make it dark enough in a certain 5-year-old's room at bedtime, or to help him sleep past 4:30 in the morning. With apologies to the warm weather lovers among us here in the Northern Hemisphere, this is the last weekend of summer. The autumn equinox will arrive on Wednesday. Here in Greater New Haven, surrounded by so many academic institutions, we recognize the start of another new season at this time of year as students fill classrooms and roam campuses, as we adjust our driving patterns to avoid the bus routes at certain times of day. And although it is harder to notice in the seemingly endless stream of Zoom gatherings, the new church program year has begun too. Last week, our Jewish friends and neighbors marked the beginning of a new year in their calendar with the festival of Rosh Hashanah. For us Christians, the new liturgical year starts on the first Sunday of Advent, which happens this year at the end of November. And of course, for most of the world, the new calendar year begins on January 1st. Though we may not always think about it actively, we exist in multiple seasons all the time. The seasons of our orbit around the sun, the seasons of our climate and weather, the seasons of our religious practices, the seasons of our secular lives. And I think the same is true of the spiritual seasons described in today's reading from Ecclesiastes. In previous times, when I have read and thought about this passage, I've thought of it as a sort of multiple choice list. Choose one of the following options that most closely resembles your situation. Is this a time to mourn, or is it a time to dance? Is it a time to seek, or is it a time to lose? Is it a time to love, or is it a time to hate? I thought about the seasons the poem describes as sequential, linear, moving from one into another as time unfolds. And I find good news in that reading for when it is a time for war or a time to mourn. The seasons few of us would choose to enter voluntarily. The poet reminds us that those bleak seasons will not last forever, that there will come a season of peace and a time for joy. Now, maybe it's just that the fuzziness of COVID brain has addled my thinking, or maybe it's these 18 months of what some of my colleagues have taken to calling Coronatide without much change of scenery, where the activities that used to differentiate our days and our seasons now all occur on the same laptop screen at the same desk in the same room of the same house. Or maybe, just maybe, it is the wisdom of the Spirit showing up and teaching me a thing or two. In any case, I've come to see those seasons described in Ecclesiastes not so much as sequential and linear, not as choose one from the list, but as cyclical, overlapping, coexisting, multiple at once. I know families, perhaps you do too, in which a baby has been born and a grandparent has died within days or even hours of one another. A time to be born and a time to die, all mixed up together. I know people, perhaps you do too, who are going through cancer treatment with chemotherapy or radiation, which are toxic to the cancer cells and some of your other cells too, but ultimately help to restore your health. A time to kill and a time to heal, two sides of the very same coin. I know gardeners, perhaps you do too, who will be out this month planting bulbs in their flower beds while also harvesting tomatoes and peppers and squash. A time to plant and a time to pluck up what is planted, all at the same time. I know quilters, perhaps you do too, who cut up old scraps of old fabric and stitch them into gorgeous new patterns, a time to rend and a time to sew, all part of the same project. I know people, and you do too, who are in a season of anticipating a new beginning with eagerness while simultaneously being in a season of ending that brings real grief and loss and sadness. A time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance mingled into one. If this is true for us as individuals, then how much more so for us as a community? For when we come together as church, each of us shows up bringing the many seasons of our personal and familial lives. And as a gathered body, we find ourselves existing in multiple seasons at once too, marking deaths and births, holding joy and grief, speaking out and listening, practicing urgency and patience. But what is true, what is constant, what is consistent always in and out of season is the call to follow Jesus, the call to be disciples of Christ. The story we heard from the Gospel according to Matthew is a particularly stark depiction of that call. Jesus wanted to get away from the crowd, so he told his disciples to set out for the other side of the lake. "Lord, first let me go and bury my father," said a disciple. But Jesus said to him, "Follow me and let the dead bury their own dead." Ouch. When I hear this, I imagine a grieving disciple wishing to go and do the last things that human hearts and hands can do for a beloved parent gone to glory, or wanting to go and find care and support in the midst of others who had known and loved their father. It sounds awfully harsh then for Jesus to deny the request in quite so callous terms. But when Jesus' words sound like bad news to me, I ask myself, can I imagine someone for whom they might sound like good news? And here I wonder if perhaps that disciple was a firstborn son going to fulfill his filial obligation, but without any love in his heart for his father, who might have been violent or abusive or addicted or absent or homophobic or bigoted or overly demanding. Perhaps that harsh command from Jesus might have sounded like liberation for one who had found true kinship in a chosen family, much more than he ever had known in his family of origin. Or perhaps we can't explain it away like that. Perhaps it is as stark as it sounds. Perhaps Jesus is reminding his disciples, and the gospel writer is reminding us, that sometimes we are called to make a hard choice. Sometimes the call to discipleship is costly. Sometimes it might require a separation from something or someone we have held dear, if the call on our lives moves in a different direction, and that something or someone will not or cannot come with us. But not always. For everything there is a season. Christ's call for us and our faithful response to that call take different forms for different times. The call to be disciples, the call to follow Jesus, is constant, consistent, in and out of season, but what that call looks like, feels like, sounds like, what a faithful response might mean is different as the seasons of our lives turn. And so we are called to discern. When the world is in a time of war, what does it mean to follow Christ? When the world is in a time of hate, what does it mean to follow Christ? When our community is in a time of refraining from embracing, what does it mean to follow Christ? When our community is in a time of healing, what does it mean to follow Christ? When your life is in a time of breaking down, what does it mean to follow Christ? When your life is in a time of seeking, what does it mean to follow Christ? The call to be Christ's disciples is constant, consistent in and out of season, and so we are called to discern. What are the seasons in which you find yourself today? What are the seasons in which we find ourselves together today? What might it mean for you, for us, to follow Jesus in this moment, today, in these seasons, in your life, in our community's common life, in the life of the world? To what is Jesus calling you in this season? What new life are you being invited to accept in this season? Is there something you are being called to leave behind in order to step into that new future? The season you're in, or the multiple, even contradictory seasons you're in, won't last forever. A time of war will give way to a time of peace. A time to weep will give way to a time to laugh. But in and out of season, you are called as a follower of Jesus, a disciple of Christ, called to be part of a new and abundant life, a life of consolation and hope, a life of love and justice, a life in which you fulfill your truest identity as a beloved child of God, a life in which we fulfill our truest identity together as the body of Christ, on earth as it is in heaven. Amen.